Top Med Talk.
Nick Majerison here. This piece is taken from the Society of Cardiovascular Anesthesiologists annual meeting. We're going to be looking forward to their new meeting, which is happening on April the 18th through to the 21st this year. Make sure you pop along and you can have a chat to the Top Med Talk team when we're there. Want more details? The place to go. SCA HQ. That's scahq.org. I hope you enjoy the podcast.
Well, welcome to Top Med Talk. We are here in Chicago at the Society of Cardiovascular Anesthesiologists 41st Annual Meeting. I'm Desiree Chappell, host and managing editor of Top Med Talk, and we've been able to catch up with some of the leaders within this organization. So we have Andy Shaw, who's been able to sit down with us. And Andy, you're actually are you the treasurer now for SCA?
No, I was until about 15 minutes ago.
That was a couple hours.
Treasurer, now I'm the president-elect.
You are the president-elect, so that's a little bit cooler than treasurer, maybe.
A little bit, but I guess we'll see.
All right. Well, we don't have a ton of time to sit down, but we definitely wanted to talk to you a little bit about the organization and maybe chat with you a little bit about POCI just quickly about that. But we also have another special guest with us, Nanette Schwann. Yeah, right. Nanette, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background.
I am a cardiac anesthesiologist and an intensivist. I'm the vice chair for research and education and professor of anesthesiology at Lehigh Valley Health Network, which is I think the third largest cardiac surgical program in Pennsylvania, I think. We're, big level 1 trauma center, and we do a lot of cases. And I also head the Clinical Practice Improvement Committee, which is an initiative that was and is being sponsored by the Society of Cardiovascular Anesthesiologists to bring evidence-based practice in a consistent way to our practitioners and our membership, and ultimately bundle those for the improvement of patient-centered outcomes and reduction of costs.
I love it. Michael Eaton was explaining a little bit about that yesterday. That is such an important piece.
Yes, we had a spot on the refresher course circuit, which was the first, which is obviously the opening session, and I was the third speaker. And we had, it's funny because at the end of the session, you can tell by people's interest by, how many people come up after you. We didn't have enough time to have actual formal questions, but I have a lot of people come up at the end of the session and as well as email me in the interim. Yeah. Who basically sort of expressed the following sentiment. Could you please come and give grand rounds at the University of X? And by the way, I am so happy to be an SCA member. This talk has made me so proud to be part of this organization because you're finally bringing content that the average practitioner can use at the point of care that's actually going to practically impact my life and the way I do my business day to day and then deliver care to my patients. So we hear this all the time. Different areas of evidence have different barriers to implementation, and each particular area has different barriers. And our goals are to better understand how we can affect human behavior and intrinsic human nature. It stands in the way of that consistent implementation. So we've kind of identified, through focus groups and the surveying of our constituency, which particular areas need improvement. Yeah. And also that might be the most impactful economically and the most impactful for patients, actually, because, for example, it doesn't really matter if your length of stay is really short if you get discharged from the hospital hemiplegic.
Right.
So, sort of in orders of priorities, what's really important before we kind of get to the smaller nuances of care and whether you're nice or you're pleasant, you have to actually have a viable patient at the end of their intervention. And cardiac surgical patients are unique in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. So this is first year that you have implemented that into the program?
Into the program, I think.
Yeah, this is the first introduction.
This is the Society's response to the request for accessible, digestible content that's relevant on a day-to-day basis. And the work that Dr. Schwann and her group have put together really encapsulates that. It's for the busy clinician who doesn't have time to read a 140-page summary document, but wants to know what to do in any given moment. And it's finally the Society has got around to delivering content that real-world clinicians want. And that fundamentally is why we're here, to serve the patients that we take care of, but also our constituent members. And I'm really delighted to be leading the Society at a time when we're finally getting around to doing that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Where do you see all of this going and the transition of bringing this into the Society? And
Yeah, so ultimately what our goals are, so we've sort of identified core key clinical areas. So in blood management and perioperative atrial fibrillation, for example, the prevention of that, in maximizing neurologic outcomes, protective lung strategies, for example, as well as, focus on thoracic surgery and the prevention of acute kidney injury. So those are sort of our initial focus. So we figure if we can take all of those best practice recommendations and put them into a best practice bundle. We may or may not call that an ERACS package.
Sure.
We still have to work out precisely sort of the infrastructure of how we're going to do that and how we can roll that out best. What social media platforms, what kind of specific engagements or perhaps even coaching services we may want to offer. So there could be a menu of options like, here's the content.
Yes.
And, oh, by the way, here are some experts who, we have to help you implement those. So one of the things that comes to mind as a good model for that is the work that Peter Pronovost did with CLASP. So we were part of the original quality and safety focus initiatives. And what basically they did is they brought a bunch of human factors, engineers, safety experts, sociologists. They brought 5 of these guys and stationed them around our operating room. And they identified, they stayed for 3 or 4 cases, and they identified stuff. They kept on writing stuff down, and I'm like, I don't know, what does that mean? What does that mean? And they basically critiqued about what we did wrong. And then ultimately, after, they devised a list of what are the things we were doing wrong, they actually brought in coaches to not just say, hey, here's a list, work on it, but this is how you can do things better. And so, maybe the society could begin to offer something as basic as, okay, here's the spreadsheet and the content, and run with it because you have the infrastructure at your place to implement it. Or, maybe you could hire us as our subcontracting agency and we can come help you do that in some way so that it isn't just content, but we really show you how to do it.
Yeah. So for now, Nanette, is it fair to say that we're focusing on neuro, AFib, acute kidney injury?
Blood management.
Blood management.
Yes.
So we think those are big ticket items that clinicians are worried about, and the goal is to provide some very succinct, accessible, but readily available content for people to help them in their daily practice.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is, if somebody wants to get this information, how are you going to be disseminating?
So number one thing is all of these things will be published in joint publication in anesthesia and analgesia. So the AFib paper was published in January. Okay. It's also on the SCA website, and it's not actually behind the firewall at the moment. There's also a podcast that's been done by the lead author, Danny Muschlegel.
So folks can get to that through our website.
Through your website. I think that was tweeted. You had to tweet that. Yeah.
And we're also planning on doing a mass email to let people know. The blood conservation paper is also already been accepted by the Cardiothoracic Anesthesia and Vascular Anesthesia, the Red Journal. And it will also be published in ANA.
Which, as a little plug, which SCA members can now choose to receive as their journal subscription if they want to.
That's right. That's
fantastic.
Changed. Yeah. I also included in the AFib publication, there's an editorial written by me about clinical practice improvement, the gap between care that is and care that should be, crossing the quality chasm.
Fantastic.
So mind the gap, as they say in the UK.
Mind the gap.
That's exactly right.
Mind the gap.
Very good.
That's great.
That was actually the title of it. So mind the gap.
I love it. That is fantastic. Well, that is great news that the SCA is going in this direction of helping people translate evidence into practice and figure out how to actually make it all work. I think it's so important. Before we wrap up, because I know you guys are trying to get to the next session, Andy, where do you, as president-elect, where do you see the SCA going in the direction in the next year?
So you're going to see us focus on a number of areas, all of which related fundamentally to improve patient care. We like to keep the patient front and central. You're going to see us working on certification for a cardiovascular anesthesiologist as a subspecialty. We're working with the ABA on that. You're going to see us look to lead CPI projects, like you've just heard. And then our third focus is going to be on education for everybody. We're going to try and make our content more accessible to folks, to try and increase the value proposition of being an SCA member.
Yeah.
And you'll see us working on that over the course of the next 2 to 3 years.
That's fantastic. Well, I wanted to touch on POCI quickly before we leave. Andy, you are also a member of this organization. Can you tell us just quickly, POCI, Perioperative Quality Initiative?
That's right.
We talk a lot about it. You guys have just had some papers. Do you want to plug some of the stuff that's been coming out?
So we are literally just planning now our 7th meeting, which will be in Cambridge in the UK this year, focusing on acute kidney injury. not in the context of heart surgery, because that was done by the Acute Disease Quality Initiative this time last year, ADQI. So POCI is a perioperative version of ADQI, which is now in its 24th, 25th iteration. And the goal is, just like at CPI at SCA, is to try and distill the literature in a specific clinical problem area down to a format that's accessible. Typically, it's done by a modified Delphi framework with a conference that lasts over 3 or 4 days. There's a backwards and forwards discussion. There's usually 3 or 4 focus groups, each of whom produce a paper. And we've done that reasonably successfully. We've published everything that we've done so far. It's all available at poci.org. All of the infographics and the images are held by POCI, and they're freely available for people to use in their educational programming. So poci.org is where you can find out all about the Perioperative Quality Initiative.
Yeah, it's the whole foam med that you see a lot on social media, free open access medical education.
That's right.
And I love it. So we can find you guys also on social media. I know
yes,
that
you can. Yes, with that we've started to tweet. Mike Grocott's doing a really good job with that, as he does with everything he gets involved in. So yes, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Yeah, that's
no
fantastic.
Snapchat.
Yeah, no, I know. We're just on Instagram now, so the pics thing. But no Snapchatting.
I understand that someone tweeted a picture of me and someone else out yesterday, so apparently that's out there.
It's a thing. It's out there forever. So it's good.
I have to run because I want to go to we have a new special interest group for women in cardiac anesthesia, and as the president-elect, I want to go and hear what they want to do and how I can help them do that.
Absolutely.
This has been great. Thank you very much.
We had an event on that last night. We had a little dinner party, and that was very useful.
Right.
So
thank you both so much for sitting down
with us. Thank you for having us.
Sparing the time, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon. It's Desiree Chappell here. Just a quick reminder, subscribe to Top Med Talk. We're a daily source of news and conversation focused on perioperative care. We bring you all the latest talk from all the major conferences in the perioperative space. We can also be found on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and we now have a free mailing list with special offers and additional goodies for subscribers. Go check us out at topmedtalk.com. That's www.topmedtalk.com.